back here on the point after. 585-395-2500 is the number if you want to call in. Right now, we're joined by Ted Conroy of 89.1 out in Syracuse, New York. He is the play-by-play voice of Syracuse men's lacrosse. Ted, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing pretty good. You did get it wrong at 88.3. We're about 0.9 off on the FM dial, but my roommate actually is the GM over at the 89, so no worries. But yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I'm sitting in the Detroit airport right now, waiting in a layover until I get back to Syracuse. It's pretty stormy right now.
How is that working out for you, taking the plane travel? We're used to going to places like Plattsburgh and Oswego, but you're out playing in calling the games out in Notre Dame. How's that working out for you? It must be a good trip to go on and a good gig to have.
Well, I'm going to let you know right now that I hate flying. I'm with my broadcast partner, Kevin Brown, who's absolutely vanilla when it comes to it. He doesn't care. But I'm on the flight, and I'm freaking out. If I hear a bump, if I feel anything, I am not a fan of it. I would rather drive to South Bend, Indiana. Would have been my preference, obviously. But overall, a great trip. Notre Dame's campus itself is beautiful. South Bend, if you want to just go to South Bend, I wouldn't recommend it. Everything is closed on Sundays, first of all, and it's kind of not the nicest of towns, but the campus itself on Notre Dame was a beautiful place. Our Lotta Stadium, the place where they played the game, is a brand-new facility. We were right next to ESPNU's coverage, and my good friend Carter Blackburn, who calls the games for ESPNU, gave us a nice little shout-out on air. So overall, it has been a great trip. We had a great cab driver. His name was Tom. So if you're ever in South Bend, call Tom the cab driver. This guy knows his stuff.
All right, we definitely make sure we call Tom the cab driver. But I'm sure it was even better to know that the team can and just took care of the number 19 team in the nation, Notre Dame, 12-6. And this hasn't been a rare occurrence. You look at some of the teams that Syracuse has played this year. We'll get to the Virginia game in a second. But Georgetown 15-12, Johns Hopkins 10-7, and Villanova, number 17 at the time, 20-6, 13-4. Syracuse, two-time or three-time, I might be mistaken, defending national champions. They're trying to make it obvious that they are hands down the best team after that loss to Virginia.
Well, I can tell you if things go right, it'll be three-time defending national champions. But right now, they do stand at 2, and I'm sorry about the thing in the back of your ears right now, but the PA system in Detroit is ridiculously loud. Anyways, if I could just expound on that, this team has played some of the best defense I've ever seen a Syracuse lacrosse team play. Everybody will make waves about the offense, scoring 20 goals against Villanova and whatnot, but the fact is the team has not allowed double-digit goals since the game against Georgetown that they managed to outscore the Hoyas anyways. And this is a defensive team that we have not seen really in Syracuse probably in the 2000s. A great defensive team. John Galloway, obviously a great goalie, and somebody who I think should be a very serious candidate for the Dwarton Trophy should be Joel White, the long-stick midfielder from Portland. He is an absolute beast. I think he's the best player in the country here.
And then looking even at that entire shot statistics, looking back and forth, shots per game, 41.4 for Syracuse, 28 for their opponents. Goals scored per game, 12.62 for Syracuse, 7.31. But the stat that a lot of people overlook sometimes is the amount of ground balls that Syracuse is able to get over their opponents, 483 to 327. What makes that click?
Well, what really makes that click, first of all, coming into the season, the big question was how they were going to replace the midfield line. They had a really talented senior core of midfielders that did everything for them. Dan Hardy, Pat Parrott, the list goes. A guy who was a ground ball machine, but simply put, the midfield has done its job. And if you look at the attack line, their amount of ground balls, their ability to scoop balls up has been unparalleled. Syracuse isn't the best shooting percentage team, but in terms of rebound goals, when you look at a guy like Steven Keogh, they're coming off from ground balls. They're doing it in that department. And another guy you got to look at is Joel White, a guy who, like I said, one of the best players in the country. If you had to ask me, if you had to give me a Dwarton vote, I'd vote him as the winner right now. He's over 50 ground balls. And one other guy, Joe Von Miller, a junior from Christian Brothers Academy, has really turned it on. He had somewhere in the neighborhood of 34 ground balls last year. Right now, he's over the 45 ground ball mark, and he has had a great season. This team gets after it on ground balls. They're very scrappy. They're a physical team when they need to be. They're not a finesse team. They will get down and dirty when they need to, and they have gotten plenty of ground balls. You're absolutely right. That has been the defining statistic, along with faceoff.
And you mentioned mentioned some of the players that, just stand out, but how about John Desko at the helm of this Syracuse Lacrosse team? He's been with the years, 5 national champions. He hands down the best coach in the country for D1 lacrosse.
I think, and I was talking about this with Kevin on the way into our Lotta Stadium. As a coach, John Desko, you couldn't argue. He is the best coach in the country. A perfect example, I'm going to go back to Joel White. I've been shooting this much on your guys' show so far. But this guy came in as an offensive midfielder. He was the guy who scored more than 50 goals when he was a senior at Cortland, and he got in, and the midfield was locked in. So John Desko, the coach, said, let's try you out, had a long ball. Joel White had never picked up a long stick before in his life. Within 2 weeks, he was one of the best in the country. And it's little things like that, his ability to move guys around and put them in places where they can succeed is unparalleled. Take another guy like Max Bartik, a guy who hasn't really played till this year, finally gets in on the midfield line. He used to be an attackman. He said, you know what, we want to slide you up to midfield because we have to replace some depth from last year. He's got 13 goals and now 2 assists after yesterday on the season. I think he's actually up to 14 goals now. John Desko, as a head coach, definitely the best in the country. As a recruiter, I think you could make the argument for Dom Starja at Virginia because he gets really after it, and he comes and goes everywhere to every tournament, and he does get the best numbers. But as a hands-down coach, I got to give it to John Desko.
And now one difference that Syracuse has had this year in terms of other years is usually they play as an independent, and this year they've made the switch. Big East really starting to define itself as a lacrosse conference, bringing in some solid teams. A lot of the teams that you'd expect that are good multiple teams, Georgetown, Villanova, Notre Dame, all of them are ranked, as well as Syracuse. How would that help Syracuse going into selection, the next week's selection Sunday, that there's a pretty good chance that they'll see at least one team that they've seen before?
Well, it is a good thing. The Big East is an interesting experiment simply because when it came to it and they said the Big East was forming, I called it the Big East Conference sponsored by Syracuse University because, let's be honest, hands down, Syracuse is the flagship. It is the standard bearer of the Big East Conference. But, yeah, it absolutely helps them. Right now their RPI stands at 4, Their RPI stands at 4, and that doesn't bode well for the best seed in the country, especially for a team that would like to have those number 1 overall seeds. But in terms of battle-testedness and in facing top 10 teams, combined with the non-conference schedule that they have, playing the Hopkins of the world that you've talked about, despite their down years, playing the Princetons out there, it really has battle-hardened them. A team like Virginia, which they did lose to 10-11 down in Blacksburg, Virginia. But, it's something that definitely does help them when they come into this weekend or into selection show next Sunday. It should help them, and right now everybody's just pining for a number 1, a number 2 overall seed. You're probably looking at the number 2 overall seed, assuming they take care of business against St. Johnson.
And Ted, you mentioned that Syracuse being the number 2 seed, if they go into the tournament, they play St. John for the Big East Championship. If they win, and they don't get the number 1 seed, what's the difference, really? Why aren't they the number 1 seed?
Well, right now they're not the number 1 seed simply because in terms of RPI, they're not there, number 4. And a lot of people have made the argument. Some people have said, well, if you're not in the Big East, your non-conference looks a lot better. Hold on 1 second, guys. Sorry about that. I was asked if I was going to Oklahoma City, and I'm obviously headed back to Syracuse. So where was I? Talking about RPI. It really comes down to the RPI. Right now they're number 4 in the RPI. They'll win against St. John's, would be my guess, most likely. St. John's took a loss this weekend, a bad loss. Can't remember who it was against, but it was not a good loss for St. John's. Syracuse, with the win at Notre Dame, did clinch the Big East Championship, so they have that. Unfortunately, the automatic qualifier doesn't kick in until next year, but that doesn't really matter too much anyways. I think right now the RPI is the one that's really hurting things for SU, and because of teams like Hopkins with the padded down year, it changes things a little bit, and they probably won't have the number 1 overall seed. But I wouldn't expect too much of a touch from St. John's. I think this is going to be a shooting gallery.
All right, Ted Conroy, have a safe trip back. By the way, I know you shared with us you're scared of planes. I hope nothing happens, no turbulence there to get you all caught up on this Sunday evening. But thanks for taking the time out to join us. 88.3 out in Syracuse, voice of the Syracuse men's lacrosse team. Hope to catch up with you out in the future.
Thank you, and please show RJ I said what up. He's got to come to the Q's before the end of May, all right?
I'm sure he'll